Welcome everyone to Evony Throne Time with Viri. Today's subject will be about making a March preset for your attack. I've been asked this question by, it seems like hundreds of people. How do you set your March, Viri? I want to know, how do I set my March? And most of us know that it's difficult to write efficiently in the Evony app to explain everything that you can to try to help people. So I am doing a video on that now, and to be honest with you, there is no right or wrong way on how to set an attack preset. The reason being is you have very diverse players out there with lower keeps, higher keeps, the amount of troops, the level of troops, the type of research they have or don't have. So it's very difficult to give you a situation to where I can say, hey, this is what you should do no matter what. So with that being said, I'm going to explain what I do and what I've found that works for me and my troops, my keep, my generals, research, and everything else. So let's get started. The first thing you will look at is in the rally spot for March preset. And as we open up the March preset, there's a little bit of lag in the game. I have set two of them. I don't think I did the third, but I will do that at a later date. But I have set two of them so far. We're in nap right now. KE is about to start, but our server, we have chosen not to do KE so we can build ourselves. So normally when I'm doing my March presets, I always use number one spot for my boss general. It's just easy for me to know, hey, he is the first one in line because I use him the most for bosses during the week. The last spot here, number 5, I use for my PvP March, at least one of them. My most important one, though. I want that button easy to get to with my thumb and not chance a mistake on pressing one of the others by having a fat thumb, per se. I think we've all experienced that at some point or other. So, and what I do with my 5th one, I will mimic with a second march, but with a different general and utilizing the same troops, which is, both of these are my archer marches. I'll utilize the same, same type of march here, just so I have another option. If I'm trapping someone, I can use the other one to attack, etc., etc. And then I use my center one here, number 3, for a ground march. Sometimes you might want to do a wave attack, or you need to trap the trap that you are removing quickly. Quick example, you're trapping somebody, you're waiting for someone to come in and attack them, but they don't, they scout them. So you quickly bring your your original troops back and send a different march. So you're hoping that they're looking at the report as you're doing this, so they send the wrong troops and they get demolished. But nonetheless, I am going to go to my PvP march here, my main one, and I want to show you this right here. I have no buffs on right now, so my max march with Alfred here is going to be almost 1.6 million. I've already preset him for a 2.3 million march, but if I don't put my buffs on when I'm setting the march up as a preset, then when I go to PvP and I click my buffs, those troops won't be there. It will only be 1.6 million troops. So it's extremely important that you place your buffs on prior to making a preset. So I will put those 2 buffs on. March size capacity, I use the 200% for 1 hour, and I use the all troops attack, the 50%, or excuse me, the 20% for 1 hour. Okay, you need both of those on there to make this preset effective. So now when I go back into the rally spot, we're going to see a much higher troop count that I can apply this march with. Now, it's at 2.294 million, so 2.3 million. Much better March, more success when I attack somebody. And it's just it's something you cannot forget as you're doing a preset. And that goes for all of them. I try to quickly, when I typically never delete this March here, but these three I will. I'll put Babers in there during the week for joining rallies so I can get some double drops. But when SVS comes, a couple of days prior to that, I start setting these up as well. So it's important to remember where you put these, these marches, and to try to do it fairly quickly. I do all of my numbers first on a pad of paper, and I'll get into that in just a few moments. That way I can utilize the 1 hour buffs I just placed on there and not have to do it again. But if I'm too slow at creating each of these presets, then it's going to revert back to a standard march, and then I have to do it again. So you're just wasting your buffs there if you can't complete however many marches it is you want to make a preset within that 1 hour time frame. So very important. Go to your keep. Make sure those march the city buffs are on. March size capacity and all troops attack. 220. Okay, so let's get down to the nitty gritty. What does Viri do? Okay, now again, I'm going to preface this conversation with I'm no expert at this. I don't delve into granular numbers as other channels may regarding troop types and what you're, how big your siege is launching their bombs and all that. That's not me. I just don't get into that granular side because I don't have time in my real life to take away and do that. But what I do is I look at what troops I have available. I make assumptions based off what has worked and what has not worked in the past. I look at a lot of reports to see where I can, effectively place troop types and the amount of troops within my march. It's important to layer, though. Anybody that plays this game with a degree of skill knows you have to layer. In order to layer, you have to have the troops in each level to do that. So I'm going to start with mine, and I'll show you exactly what I do. Now you will want to get a pen and paper for this because you need to write down some numbers. If I've learned anything, I'll try to post some numbers either on the left or right side here so you can go back and look at this again. So when I go to Alfred, he is a ranged general. Okay, he's going to have range and siege buffs. So we click his pre-buff here for him. Increases the ranged troop attack by 30% and siege machines attack by 20% when he's leading my march. Okay, so I'm going to keep that in the back of my head as I'm setting this march up. All right, so my rule of thumb for any type of PvP march is whatever your general's buff is. It could be archer range, it could be horse cavalry, or it could be ground, whatever it may be. I use an 80% towards your main highest percentage buff, 15% if you do have a second pre-buff in there, and then 5% for all the rest. Otherwise, if you have a general that only has one type of buff, which is not often, typically you'll have a couple, but if you do, if you're at an area where you have that general to work with only, then I'll bump that main pre-buff percentage to 90% and then start spreading out, the things from there. But I'm just going over what I do for my general today with the troops I have, research and everything else, okay? So if I'm going to do 80% archer, I know my entire march is going to be 2,294,000 troops. Okay, let's just call it 2.3 million. When I take that number and multiply it by 0.8 for 80%, I get 1.84 million that I'm going to devote only to archers, nothing else. Archers, range, same thing. And I start dividing those numbers out. Okay, so this is where additional percentages come in. I am going to take my highest level, which for me is T14s. I'm going to use 32% of my T14s of the 1.8 million troops for Archer. Okay, so this is actually over 32%, and I'll tell you why I did that later in the video. So 32% on my T14s. The next one for T13, I use 21%. Okay, 21% of that 1.8 million troops for Archer. I also do 21% for my T12s. T12s are a special group. Evony, the way they designed the attacks and defense and everything like that, these guys here are just tough guys. So I try to keep more of those in there as well. And then T11, I'll go down to 5% of those. Okay, so 5% of that 1.84 is about 100,000. Next, I will look over my siege. If you remember, my general has both an archer or range buff and a siege buff. Now, it has less of a siege buff, but I still want some siege in there. Okay, for my siege percentages, my top tier, I do have T14s, but I just got those. I don't have very many, maybe 30,000 or 40,000. I don't remember. I want to keep those inside my keep for when I'm sending a march out. I have really good siege there to protect me too if someone were to attack. So I'm going to move on to my T13s instead. And I'll use the top three with percentages, my T13s, 12s, and 11s. Okay, those are the ones I want the most of. So with my T13s, I'm going to use 57%. Oh, let me back up. 15% of this 2.3 million troops I can send comes to 345,000 siege, which I'll be spreading out among my march. Okay, 15% of that. All right, so back to my T13 siege. I'm going to use 57% of that 345,000 siege I'll devote to the march, and that comes to 200,000. When I move on to my T12, I'm going to use 21%, which is 75,000 troops of the 345,000 that I'm allotting towards this march. And then my T11 siege, I will use 20%, which comes to 70,000 of those. All the rest, levels 10 through 1, I will be adding something to those as well. Let's shift back over to the archer. Okay, so the archer, we left it at T11s at 5%, okay, which was 100,000 troops. What do I do for the rest of them? You need to put some layers in there. So levels 10 all the way down to 1, we need an average number of those you can use. Okay, your numbers are going to be all over the place and different from mine. I have X amount of troops. You're going to have X amount of troops. Once you start going through this, you'll find where your deficiencies are with your lower level troops, more than likely, and you'll probably add some just to try to equal some of these percentages I'm giving you. So with tier 1 through tier 10, I use 0.018%. So almost 2% of that 1.8 million archers I'm devoting towards the march. Okay, that will be for every single level that I do here. So it equals 34,000 troops. Okay, so I'm going to put 34,000 in every single archer I have that's level 10 and below. You see here, 34, and it goes all the way down to the bottom. I'll go back over to the siege now. Once you've figured out your archer and you enter all those, the siege will have a similar type of layering, but with a lower number. My siege level 1 through 10 I multiply 0.005 into my total of 345,000 siege I'm devoting to the march. So that number equals 20,000. Okay, so 2,000. Did I do that right? I think it's 2,000. Yeah, I wrote some numbers down wrong here. So all of my T10, 9, 8, 7 down to 1 for siege is going to be at 2,000 troops. Okay. Now, this is, for me, a good layer that works. What do we do with all the rest? Well, you saw a bunch of 5s in here, okay? You'll have lots of people say, well, 500, 1,000, 2,000, or no more than 2,000, 1,800. I find that, when you're battling, whether you're defending or you're attacking, you have several rounds of attacks that happens within a few seconds. You don't see it. It's behind the scenes, but several rounds of attacks. So when you make an attack, your highest troops are attacking the lowest troops or medium troops. And you'll go through several rounds of this, kind of knocking each layer out. But I find that if you put higher numbers here, you end up losing more on your higher level archers or ground or whatever it is you're attacking with. So I like my layers to be as I'm showing you now, but all of these others, which are going to be ground and the cavalry or horse, I just put them at 5 all the way up and down. I just put 5. And for me, that's been very, very effective. Can I tweak it more? Sure, I can get very granular and try to get dead on numbers. But for me personally, I don't have the time. So I have found that either putting 5 or 10 troops in here, not 500, not 50, not 5,000, but 5 or 10. For me, I've had a more effective battle and have lost less. Now, again, it's really dependent upon who your enemy is. You do need to scout. If you're not scouting, you're not doing this right at all. You need to scout, and you cannot let yourself have the feeling of you're missing out on something if you scout them and you think they're going to move away or attack you or whatever. You need to scout. Very important for anyone who plays this game. You have to understand what the enemy has. Now, when I was saying earlier in the video that there is no right or wrong march, the reason is because everyone has different troops in their keep. They have different research, different generals, different levels of troops. It is so far-fetched to think that you're ever going to quickly set up a march based off, everyone's troop levels and things in their keep among all the people that you may attack. So if you're not scouting, you better start. That's how I get a lot of free points during SVS, is by setting a trap with a member of my own alliance on the enemy server, and someone comes in and just starts attacking without scouting. If they scouted, they would see that some big reinforcements are in there, and they wouldn't send their army to a brick wall and lose. So this is what I do, and I suggest you take the numbers that I gave you, the percentages, and try to make it effective for you. Try the march and see what happens on your next KE or SVS. And if you like what you see, you can always tweak, these numbers to make it, more efficient for you. Or you can say, you know what, Viri, you suck. That didn't work for me. And that's fine too. Again, I'm just here to explain what I do. And so I follow the same rules. I have a ground march here. My Scipio, he still needs some work. I like, where he's at, but he still needs some work, refining him, the gear and things like that. But I follow the same rules. Now he has a little bit less. Alfred has 2.294, I think it was, and he has, about 20,000 less, but not a big deal. I apply the same principles of the percentages to ground as I do the archers. And I do the same. This one isn't set up, but I always put another general here that's a range general, so I can have multiple attacks if need be when I'm trapping. The one thing I'll go quickly back to, you see, this is higher. This should be 600,000. 32% of my 1.84 mil is 600. When you get done doing all of this, you may have some left over. Unless you're just a math whiz and you can figure it out to a T, you may have some left over, and I always add it either to my level 14s or I'll add it to my 12s. One or the other, nothing else. In this case, I added it to my 14s. Advice for you that may not have the amount of troops that I have is to go through and look at your troops. Okay, when you start doing percentages and you're writing this stuff down, you can go here and look at how many troops you actually have and figure out, wow, well, I'm lacking, on level 7s, archers or ground or horse or whatever. And you can, train those. I suggest, the other big thing here is when you're marching to attack somebody could attack you. So I suggest putting up a meat shield, building your army to have a meat shield inside your keep as well. If you can see mine, and mine is, still is in a work of progress here, but, down at the first levels, I put a lot of troops. I don't build my horses. I've had these from the beginning, but I don't build those up so much because I really don't. If I can't ghost all of my horse when I'm attacked, then those are the first that are going to get killed by an archer march. So, and that's big points for the enemy. But your catapults, your siege, your ground, and your archers, build those things up. Make a bunch of them, and they're cheap. It's quicker to build the smaller ones to create a meat shield than it is the big ones to create an attack. So as you're going along, make sure you're giving some of that donated resources to building these smaller guys to make a good meat shield for you. Okay. All right. I think that's about it for the presets. If you have any comments for me, put them down in the bottom. I will respond to you as soon as possible. If you have any tips, tricks, or ideas or advice for me, do the same. I would love it if you could subscribe to the channel. Like I've said before, I'm not in this YouTube to monetarily move forward. I'm only here to help anyone else that plays the game and would like my advice or my experience to help you. So until next time, live life first, play Evony second, and I will see you on the battlefield.